Hi, I'm Mike, and today I'm going to tell you how I created this piece of art. It's a resin collage called Abstract number 93. Now, I didn't film all the steps involved because I don't work in a linear manner. Therefore, it'd be very difficult for me to film everything that I do and then try and piece the clips together. I'll be spending my whole life doing that. But I started off actually working backwards. Usually I work from the base up. This one I was experimenting with alcohol inks on sheets of acetate, clear acetate like this. And I made a number of those. This one dried a little bit darker than what I prefer. So I was able to go back and lighten it up with a little bit of alcohol and make some transparent areas. Those are some of the features I like about the alcohol inks, is the vivid color, the transparency, and the fact that you can go back and rework it once it's dry. Now, I know a lot of other resin artists mix the alcohol inks in with the resin, but I find that to be too unpredictable. So I use the acetate in a collage manner to give me more control over the image that I'm making. So then I went on and I worked on a base. This is a 12 by 12 wooden cradle, and I just painted it white and then did a dirty pour with very white light colors over it. Now, I'm not going to explain the steps involved in a dirty paint pour. You can find those all over the internet. But what I used was a 3-ounce cup with reflective white, sterling silver, and some interference golden colors. And poured it on, did the normal tilt and pour. And when it was dry, I wasn't real happy with the results. There were some areas of interesting organic patterns, but if it was for a standalone piece, I never would have kept it. I would have painted over it. But because I just needed a reflective base, it was good enough. So I added a layer of resin on top of that, the first layer, just to seal it, give it some depth. Then I wanted to add some more interest, so I used some homemade stencils that I had made. Now, these stencils were close-ups of some textured patterns. I can't really remember what they were, but I blew them up in Photoshop, made them in black and white, and cut them out of Mylar sheets on my Cricut machine. Now, the whole secret of using stencils is to store them flat, because if they get creased or bent, they're useless. You might as well start over again. So I started with the one that had the most coverage, taped it in place, and then I used this soft gel gloss from Golden, and with a palette knife I spread it all over, the stencil, covering all the holes. What that does is it seals the holes. If there's any seepage, it goes underneath and will seal the color from getting in there. And that dries clear, so you'll never see that. Then I spread the color on top, interference color. This one I did interference blue. And when that was dry, I did another layer of resin. Again, seal it, give it some more depth. Then a second layer of stencils. I used this, which is a lighter pattern, so it wouldn't cover what was underneath. I used interference gold. In the same manner, the soft gel gloss, then the paint over it. Immediately you have to pull it off and go wash your tools. You can't let the paint or the gel dry on your tools, as it will really destroy them. So when that was dry, again, another layer of resin, seal it, give it some depth. So you can already see I'm building layers of color that are on top of each other, and you can see around them, in between them, especially reflective colors, are very pretty. So at this point, I had a nice base and some alcohol inks, paintings on acetate, and a few other transparent materials. And I had to decide what I was going to put together. And so I experimented with a lot of different combinations, and I found out that this one looked the best. And so that's what I went with. So I took some clear spray glue. I used either Eileen's Tacky Spray or Gorilla Spray Glue. They both dry clear. Spray that on the back, and it gives you a minute or two to reposition the acetate if it doesn't line up exactly with the edges, which is nice. And then with a brayer, I rub it down. The acetate is thick, so there's no air bubbles that are going to get stuck like using thin vinyl. I usually wait 24 hours at that point to let things settle down. But I find that even though the wood panel is 12 by 12 inches and the acetate is 12 by 12, there's still some overlap. So I put it face down on a cutting mat, trim the edges, give it one last roll over with the brayer to give a really good adhesion, especially on the edges, and then add another coat of resin. Now 24 hours later, the resin is dry, and it seemingly is the last step, but there's one more thing that I have to do. Here's a little diagram that shows when you add the resin on top, it rolls over the top of the acetate onto the side, but there's a little gap under the edge there where gravity pulls it out. It doesn't go up into that edge. But that's simply remedied by standing the painting on its edge when it's completed and dropping a little bead of clear Gorilla Glue in that void. And once it's dry, you have a nice smooth edge, and no one ever knows that that step was accomplished. So that's my basic process. That's how I did this piece. I prefer using resin rather than acrylic paints because I enjoy the depth that it gives me and the crystal clarity of color. I'm just finding acrylic paints at this point to be too dull and too flat. I really enjoy the 3 dimensions. Even if it's just slight, you can see the shifting of the paint of the layers when you look into the depth of it. So if you've enjoyed this video, let me know. Give me some comments down below. Let me know if you liked it or if you'd like me to hear me explain how I did some more of my pieces. A thumbs up and a subscribe are always appreciated. And thanks for watching. I'm going to try and see if you can see some of the close-up details of this.